Hi everyone. This lecture is on chapter 5 of The Big Thirst, Money in the Pipes. This chapter, Fishman decides to look at industry and how industry is handling water, the pros and cons, both sides of the argument. It's really interesting though that he chooses five really large companies, and a lot of these companies, either number one or not, they consider themselves sustainable, but when you really look at the overall picture, they're not the most sustainable companies. Um, and they use a lot of water, and he drills down into each one of these companies. And it's really an interesting, um, I guess, point to show these companies and how they're using water, because they are they may be the ones who are driving the force of water conservation in the future. And he talks about that throughout this chapter. So we'll get back to that point. But the companies that he really drills into in this chapter are Coca-Cola, Levi's, Campbell Soup, Intel, IBM in previous chapters. So he really talks about companies that are using large quantities of water, that have a stake in water, because if water goes away, their company goes away. So it's absolutely important that they conserve water. And I think what Fishman is trying to get at is the bottom line is that it comes down to the fact that water has a value, and we just don't have a language yet or a dollar amount to put on water. While we pay a water bill every month, it is not an accurate amount of what we're using, etc. And so, this was discussed in Pricing the Priceless, and in numerous points throughout this course, is that how do we put a value on water? And if we do put the true value or the true cost on water, will that change people's behavior? Or does it need to happen in the other direction? Meaning, do people need to change their behavior first? But what I think Fishman's trying to get through in this chapter is the fact that he's saying that it needs to happen the opposite way, is that maybe a value on water and then the conservation will happen after it. So he poses some really good questions, and one of the biggest questions that I think that he poses is managing that water, the water use the issue, or is what we use it for the issue? So is managing water an issue, meaning, how we manage it and how we allocate the water, or is it what we're using water for is a problem? For example, are we using too much water for agriculture, or are we using too much water to watch genes with? And that went into detail here. Are we producing too much soda? Are we producing too much sugary drinks? Should we cut back on how many sugary drinks we're producing? Excuse me. So all of these things are really good questions that Fishman poses to us in this chapter. Now he's saying one way that we might be able to figure out how we're allocating water and how we're managing water is potentially through proper water reporting. And at this point in time, we do not have the most intricate or the most accurate way to report water usage. It's very voluntary. It doesn't get down to the nitty-gritty about how much we're using in each individual process. And on page 121 of this chapter, and I'll let you flip to it. So page 121 of chapter 5, and if you look, it's the first full paragraph. Fishman says it's easy to be charmed and hypnotized by all the details, but in fact the details are both besides the point and the whole point. The kind of water reporting is amazing because it's totally voluntary. So at this point, companies are reporting water on a voluntary basis. There is no regulations that they need to submit water usages the way that we really want them to submit water usage to figure out if managing it is, or how we use water is the problem. It's all new, and it is quite literally a window on the future. These companies aren't metering their water use with such precision to satisfy their curiosity or to amuse us. They're doing it because they want us to use less water, because they think they may soon have no choice but to use less, because they've discovered that simply measuring water use quickly leads to managing it better, and because some of them see that the very act of measuring and managing water use is becoming a huge business in itself. So one of these issues is we need to get up to date on reporting water usage, because then we may be able to answer some of the questions that are posed in this chapter. Another point that Fishman brings forward in this chapter is on page 122 on the bottom. And I think this is a really big point. And it comes with the fact of privatization of water. And we'll read about whether privatization of water is a good or a bad thing. We'll talk about it throughout the semester. But these companies are now running the show more than politics is, and is this the right thing? Should government be the ones who lead this initiative, or should it be the companies? Now, if it winds up being the companies, though, we have to understand that privatization is going to occur of our water sources, and if we're okay with that, then we're okay with that. But once a monopoly owns your access to water, that could become a problem in the future, because they can charge you whatever they want to access the water. Now, water will always be free, but our access to the water, how we get water to our houses or to our businesses, is what's going to cost money. And on the bottom of 122, Fishman starts talking about this. And that's that last paragraph. That is the sense in which, in this instance, business is actually ahead of politics and ahead of popular awareness. When a company that cleans dirty wool in Australia, a company that hosts gamblers in Las Vegas, a company that makes microchips in Ireland and Israel, and a company that sells the most popular drinks in the world in more countries than belong to the UN, when four such different organizations in such different geographies and lines of work all agree that a major shift is underway in something as basic as our relationship to water, why they don't just agree but change their behavior, that's something the rest of us should pay attention to. And Fishman says why. And the reason why is because it comes down to water. It comes down to money and water, meaning money is that they know there's a value in water and they're going to get in on the game before everyone else does. And we need to take a look at that and really ponder whether we want companies to take the lead, or whether we as human citizens should take the lead. Okay? I do think Fishman, he brings in a couple other really important points that I want to touch quickly on. Number one, the smart water culture, which I think is really cool. I think this is the way that humans can, not humans, but everyday citizens can get involved in the act, is that smart water culture is jumping on the bandwagon of trying out dual flush toilets and washing machines that then the gray water feeds your toilet. There's just an array of really cool new technologies out there that are the smart water culture. And he talks about the cruise ship in this chapter who decided to use the rocks instead of ice because they can freeze those rocks and then keep using them over and over again. That's the smart water culture. Right now, we are not invested in the smart water culture. Some of us are, but a lot of us are not. We still, in the United States, use the highest per gallon flush toilets. Every other country has regulations on it. We do not. And so this is a big problem in the United States, and other countries are taking the lead on it. And so we need to really step up our game. There's a lot of really cool things we can do to manage water properly and to figure out how we're using it and how not to use such astronomical amounts to do things, or using such clean water to perform certain tasks in our household. And we need to get psychologically over the fact that we should have gray water in our toilets. Why do we need clean water to flush urine and feces? I'm not sure I understand why that. So, Fishman really wants us to consider the smart water culture. Do we want big companies to take the lead? Is it managing, or is it our use? And, he just has a lot he wants us to consider, but we really need to start thinking about that privatization aspect. And on page 142, he talks a little bit about this, and it's at the bottom. So while so while it's important that companies are leaping into the water business, while it's impressive that they are providing leadership and pursuing innovation and even a vision for the future, it's also vital not to let business get so far ahead that we cede the future of water to commercial interests. So he's saying right